Welcome back to the Conversation Show, the show where we hang out and build new ways of thinking by having conversations, learning new perspectives, and getting into some of these topics that I think a lot of people, I don't know that they think about them often, but they're kind of out there. They're out there in the ether. People are aware of them, but we're not really deep diving into the conversation, and nor are we trying on our perspectives in this arena. So this is what this show is for. It allows us a space and an opportunity to try on new ideas, figure out what we believe about some of these things that are relevant in our personal lives and also in our business lives, and how, if we want to, we can be more intentional. Yeah, we can be more intentional. Why not more intentional? You know what's so funny?
Words are the best.
I'm learning Spanish right now, and there's like all of these different conjugations, and there's like future perfect or something. I'm probably getting it completely wrong, but there's one where you add like an ababa at the end. And I feel like that's what I just did. Now I'm speaking some kind of weird combination of English and Spanish. Welcome to this morning conversation show, which we don't normally have, and my mouth isn't turned on yet. Okay, anyway, the point is that if we want to be intentional about things, we can be. We have the space to be more intentional. So today we are talking about empowering new leaders. And I'm really excited about this conversation because there's two different components at play here. There are people who are giving new leadership opportunities to people. And then there's also ourselves. If we are trying to move into new or a first leadership position for ourselves, we think maybe that's the direction we want to go. What are some of the things we might be able to do for ourselves? And what are some things that other people can do for our new leaders? And as always, I have a lovely guest with me because I don't want to do all the talking because I don't learn anything. Kelsey. So Kelsey, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about why empowering new leaders is so important to you?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. And for those of you who don't know me, hello, I'm Kelsey. I'm a leadership coach, published author, advanced breathwork instructor, and the founder of Women's Leadership Accelerator. And really my primary focus within my business is coaching women in lower and mid management levels so I can provide them with the support and guidance necessary to help them advance to executive roles and beyond. And so empowering new leaders is important to me and is the basis of my business. But why it's important to me kind of comes from two things. So the first is just my own personal experiences in the corporate world and in startups. I spent the majority of my career in the tech recruitment industry. I was working my way up as a new leader and eventually working my way up to the partner level. And I mean, I was the only woman there, but most importantly, something that I noticed along the way is that there isn't really mentorship in new leaders. It was the executive team and the C-suite that got access to that kind of mentorship and support and guidance when the new leaders are what really need it. And now that I've coached and led workshops for hundreds and hundreds of women, that's something that I continue to notice. A lot of companies are investing in their executives only, which, I mean, of course, it's still incredibly important to do. But if you want to create more opportunities for your aspiring and new leaders so they can also rise through the ranks and you can have more high potential folks at the C-suite, investing in their mentorship at this point in their career will really allow them to accelerate quicker. So comes from my own experience and then seeing it within my clients as well.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this, Kelsey. And it's something that I've seen happen quite often is the first time someone gets put into a leadership position, it's kind of just, I don't know.
Figure it out.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's because people know that they like don't have management experience, but like there's so many things that are different about managing / leading people than just doing a job. And a lot of times we get promoted into a leadership position because we're good at doing a job. So what are some, well, let's just start at like the basics.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to ask you, Kelsey, because you have these conversations more. Where is a good place to start in this conversation? If perhaps, mm, let's look at it from a corporate perspective 1st. So if you have noticed that, like, hey, maybe we do this, maybe we're not really giving any help to new leaders, where is a good place for people to start?
And when you ask where's a good place for people to start, are you talking about senior level managers and managers that are running organizations where these aspiring and new leaders are working at? Or are you speaking about the new leaders individually?
Let's talk about the senior management first.
Yeah, I figured. I wanted to make sure. Okay, cool. So I think that a lot of senior managers and executives are having regular career development discussions with their employees. And usually within that, they're either seeing someone as having the potential to eventually be a leader, or someone has explicitly expressed interest in, I want to be able to get into a lead role. So how can I get there? What can I be doing in order to get there? And so I think those are those two types of people are the perfect two types of people to really invest in whatever way that looks like for you. I mean, some organizations maybe can't afford to invest in coaches and mentors, but is there someone that you can pair them up with, or can you support their growth yourself and find creative ways to ensure that they're set up for success before they get into that management role?
So let's talk about being set up for success.
Yeah.
Mostly just because I feel like I don't think any company intentionally sets people up to fail. But I do think that there's a lot of gaps that end up having a high level of either disconnection with the role or all the way up to high turnover in a role. And so what do we need to look at from an intention setting perspective from senior leadership in terms of, I know I'm bringing this person, I'm intentionally bringing this person that doesn't have leadership experience into a leadership role. What do I need to do intentionally? What do I need to pay attention to? What types of things? I think maybe I love what do I need to pay attention to? So let's just go with that. What do people need to pay attention to as this new leader starts to come on board?
Great question. And yeah, I get this question a lot. And I've taken out a lot of themes from the women I've coached and the workshops I've led, just common themes and topics on things that are the most valued and that leaders really like to see, or new leaders really like to see. And I think the things to pay attention to are communication style. Are they able to have those difficult conversations? Are they able to deliver feedback? How do they receive feedback? And everything surrounding communication, because a lot of the times when an individual contributor goes into a leadership role, I mean, as an individual contributor, sometimes when we receive feedback, we are still taking things a little bit personally, and you cannot do that as a leader. My favorite saying is, leaders eat feedback for breakfast. It is not always about you. And rarely it's about you. You need to be able to take that feedback and turn it into a learning experience and apply it to how you're going to continue to change and grow as a leader. And there's so many I can take on that, but I think an important piece of that is, as a senior manager or executive, letting your brand new leaders know that it is safe to make mistakes. And after spending lots of time with many new leaders, most of them, I'm going to say maybe 90% of them, have a massive fear of making mistakes, because then they perceive themselves as a failure. Then they go down the rabbit hole, which in their mind effectively leads to them losing out on the opportunity that they worked so hard for. So if they don't know how to do something, they are suffering inside and not asking for help and trying to figure it out on their own, out of this desperate fear of failure. And then when they receive feedback, then they project that outwards, and that's what causes them to take things more personally. And so, of course, I mean, you don't want your leaders to be dropping the ball left, right, and center, but being able to create that psychological safety and safe space to allow them, like, hey, this is okay. It's rarely the truth that you are going to lose your job completely if you make a mistake, but don't like feed yourself the narrative that you need to be perfect for this. So Yeah.
I think this is interesting, true, Andrew is sharing, like, and saying that you always have the answer, right?
Yes.
Like, I think a lot, especially junior leaders, they think that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to have all the
Exactly.
answers. And I think, okay, so while you were sharing that though, Kelsey, there was like a bigger culture question that was echoing in my brain, is that like, how do, I mean, I feel like to some degree we can't create that for new leaders if it doesn't exist on a like corporate level, that like ability to fail and things like that. So let's flip this a little bit from the new leaders perspective, because this is something that I experienced myself, is that I believe that humans fail. And in failure, we learn and we grow. And without failure, we actually end up behind because we're not moving forward. And so when I was leading teams, I always was like, first day to new employees, you will make a mistake. You will. You will not get fired for making mistakes.
The world needs more leaders like you.
we are a team. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. We're all going to make mistakes, including me, probably including me in my management style of you, as we learn each other. And this is about like, how do we make this work as a team? And how do we support each other in our failures? Because I do believe our failures move us forward. And so like, what are some of those things that if you're a new leader and you have that type of gusto, how can you bring that to the table, maybe even if you're not receiving that from your management?
Okay, so how can you bring it to the table? Like, I know I'm
Even
going to
if
make
I'm not
mistakes.
receiving it, how can I like create a space of that for my team?
Yeah, and I think exactly, I mean, in your experience, were you receiving that from your manager, or was that just something that you knew was important and that you decided to create?
It was like what I believed good leadership to be. And I had, luckily for me, I had received it in other roles. I wasn't necessarily receiving it at the time, but I knew what that looked like. So then I could give it to my team in my version.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that really is the basis of it, and the heart of it is that I think the responsibility that we have as leaders is that we get to define what leadership looks like for us. And if our manager isn't exhibiting every single quality that we would like to exhibit, like, now it's our choice. It's our choice to behave differently. And easier said than done. A lot of the times, like, we learn to behave based on what we've received in leadership experiences, and then eventually we get to a point where we're like, okay, I know this wasn't good. I've learned now that this isn't what I do. This is what I don't like. And so this is how I am going to be instead. But realistically, it comes down to taking that intentional time before stepping into that new leadership role to define, like, what does leadership look like for me? How am I being? How am I supporting others? What does that look like? And just getting, and also, what does success look like for me as a leader in my role? What needs to happen in order for me to feel successful? And really just writing down and reflecting all of those questions, so you have that North Star to continue to guide you back.
Yeah. Okay. So on that point, Kelsey, I think there's kind of this societal narrative about what leadership is. And then there's also, as you mentioned, our unique version of that. And so with the young leaders that you work with, how common is it to default to the societal definition of what leadership looks like? And then what else can we do to kind of incorporate our own spice into what that is?
Great questions. And I think, so the answer to your first question, it's very common. I've had many women who work with me and they're like, but I'm an introvert. I can't be a good leader. And it's like, it's reshifting that narrative. Introverts are amazing leaders. You're more empathic. You're intuitive. You understand people's emotions and feelings. And also, I also just think generally, this is a whole other topic, but defining ourselves by labels as introvert and extrovert, because at the end of the day, a lot of us can fall a little bit outside of that in many different ways. Like, most people would classify me as an extrovert, but I really need time alone to recharge. So sure, give me a label of extroverted introverted or introverted extrovert, but don't let that define who you are. And I think that also kind of answers your second question is however you define yourself, that or whatever label you give yourself does not define who you are as a person, does not define who you are as a leader as well.
Yeah. And I think this is so important because I think to some degree there's a lot of complexities in leadership, right? I think we've
so many.
built it. And we only have 45 minutes today, so we'll cover what we can. But there's like this hierarchy, which is like kind of mirroring what leadership would look like, but not really tied to being a leader. It's more about being a manager. And that's very common in corporate structures. We have certain ways people identify, maybe as a introvert. I've worked with a lot of software developers, right? And there's just like this mindset that people are like, I could never be a leader, right? Like I'm good at math, so I can't lead people. And you're like, what? Like, it's not a thing. There's so many of those societal mindsets, but equally our own individual mindsets that keep us limited from the belief that we can be a leader. I did this workshop a while back now, and it was mostly focused on like your personal brand as a leader. And we did this exercise where we like had everyone close their eyes and people visualized the leader. And I said, like, what do they look like? Like, what are they wearing? Where are they standing? And those types of things. And then I asked them to put themselves in that room. And most of the people didn't feel comfortable in that room. And so they had created this vision of what leadership is that they didn't want to be in. And it's going to be very hard to move forward towards that if that's what you think the destination is. And so there's almost this like peeling back of how do we redefine that destination? So Kelsey, with some of your clients and in your workshops, what are some of the ways that you guys work to redefine that destination?
And I do an exercise that's very similar, but also I'm a breathwork instructor and meditation instructor. So I basically take my women into a meditation, have them close their eyes, and I tell them that they are painting a picture of a leader. And sometimes they don't even paint a person. Sometimes they paint shapes, they paint certain colors, whatever it is, whatever comes to them. And they don't have enough time to overthink it. So whatever comes up for them, they paint it. I don't ask them to put themselves in the picture. But what I do is when they open their eyes, we're talking about, okay, well, what about that picture and what you saw, whether it be the colors, the shapes, the person, what qualities did you see in that picture that made you view them as a leader? Okay, well, then what qualities do you see in yourself today? And then I have a very clear picture of, okay, well, here's what you feel about yourself today. And here are the things that you didn't mention that I know you're striving towards. And that is going to be our guide for the rest of our experience together. And what success looks like for you and how you know you're going to be successful, again, comes back to that. And I mean, there's so many other tools outside of that, like determining what those limiting narratives are and finding a way to shift them, where they came from. And even something that doesn't seem like it impacts your leadership, but the biggest thing I've noticed with a lot of new leaders is, again, because of that perfectionism and wanting to prove themselves, they overwork and they burn themselves out. And so energy management, understanding what accelerates and drains your energy, and recognizing what I think a lot of new leaders really recognize in working with me is that they spend a lot of time on things that drain them. And so being able to shift that and manage their schedule, and then all of these little things build up and add up and end up having this adverse effect on the rest of their lives. And I think going back to even that leader picture, a big thing that we talk about and how I define leadership with the women I work with is leadership is so much more than who you are at work and how you're showing up at work. I mean, you are a whole person, and there are there are 5 balls of life that we're focusing on. I mean, we've got friends and family, and we've got your health, we've got your soul, and there's so many important areas of your life. So we are defining leadership in terms of elevating yourself in your own light and potential in a way that inspires and empowers others around you to do the same, but also inspires you to take action to be your highest self in all areas of your life, not just, who you're showing up as at work.
Mm-hmm. I think that it is so important. I'm glad you brought in the breathwork component, because I wanted to come back to this energy management, because I don't think that we talk about that enough, whether it's for new leaders or experienced leaders. There's a lot of things. Okay, so for new leaders in particular, there's a lot of new things you're experiencing.
A lot of new things.
And you may not know how you feel about any of those things. And especially if, like, I had this experience because I had a leader who thought I was not a very good negotiator. So I was fed all of the negotiation training. And I was like, I get this. I get it. But really where the misalignment was is that my boss and I did not want to negotiate the same way. I wanted to negotiate more from a collaboration perspective. My boss wanted to negotiate from a winning perspective, and I couldn't learn the winning perspective because I couldn't do it and feel good about it. And so there's that component too of, you might have a leader or someone else in your team who does things a certain way. And when you are exposed to it for the first time, you might assume that you too have to do it exactly the same way. And you might be lucky and it might be aligned, but I would guess that most of the time it's not aligned. And then there's also this conversation we need to have with ourselves about who, like you said, with the picture, who am I as a leader? What does that picture look like? And it looks different than the picture of my person who's leading me.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things, breathwork might be one, what are some of the things that we can do to feel into those new experiences to try and connect to how we're even actually feeling about it?
Yeah. And you're right. I always say, I mean, you can do all the journaling and write all the affirmations in the world, but at the end of the day, the mindset pieces are only going to take you so far. And a lot of the stress and tension and emotions that we experience on a day-to-day basis, we're holding in our body in some ways. And this is a lot of what I talk about as a breathwork instructor, is that if we're feeling any sort of pain or tension or disease, a lot of the time that's been created by emotions that are stuck in our body, or trauma that's stuck in our body that we haven't been able to release. And that's why, I mean, breath work is one that I'll talk about, but that's why exercise is so important, or yoga, or any sort of physical activity, because I mean, the serotonin boost is real. We are moving those emotions and energy outside of us so we can tune in to what we need. And how many people here, when you're at the gym in the middle of the workout, is when your best ideas come to you? Or, I mean, when you're in the shower because you're finally quieting your mind. I get so many shower ideas. It's sometimes frustrating.
I know. I keep telling myself I need a whiteboard right outside my shower so I can just reach out and write it down and get back to it.
Oh yeah. When the steam forms on the glass next to my shower, I'm making notes on the glass.
And then you're just
yeah. Stay there. I'm not done yet. Yeah.
But that's, and I think too, even from, I mean, this is based on my experience, right? There's very little time allotted for those types of things, like quieting of your mind, in the corporate work scenario. And especially if you're a leader, I've known leaders who lead 150 people, right? They have 150 people reporting to them. And you're if I try to extrapolate that, because honestly, the most I've ever had reporting to me is 8. And I thought that that was a good amount, because I could know enough about them that I could help them with their job, and I could stay on top of my work, but also still help them. But I was like, that would be actually miserable for me, like knowing me, who I am now,
Yeah.
because I would just feel like I was constantly disappointing everybody because I wouldn't be able to execute the way I want to execute in relationships with 150 people. I just like, I can't do that. And so there's like, how do we as leaders, how do we approach approach the things that we see as a new leader that maybe we need to address as an organization? Because I feel like when we have that, like, well, I'm new here, so I'm just gonna like sit back and wait and watch and do what I'm told. But there's things that you see because you are uniquely you. So now, from a leadership perspective, how do we how do we find the confidence to bring our voice to the table?
Yeah, and I hear this a lot of like, I'm new, I'm not credible enough, no one's going to listen to my ideas, and all of these limiting beliefs that build up. What if they don't like my idea? There's just so many of those that I hear pretty regularly, and I know how common it is. And I think that, so I have a couple thoughts here, but I think that, I mean, first of all, reminding yourself that you were promoted to a leadership role for a reason. And a lot of the times, and really, I mean, what that is imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not credible enough, I'm not this enough. And something I really want to remind new leaders of is that imposter syndrome rarely comes up when we're failing at something. It comes up when we've leveled up and we're trying to protect ourselves from failing at this new level because we're uncomfortable here and we've never been here before. And so imposter syndrome and those feelings of like, what if I have a stupid idea? What if I'm not credible enough? That actually means that you've achieved a ton of success that is forcing you to level up, AKA, I mean, you're a total badass, but
if only we told ourselves that more often.
Exactly. And I think also, I mean, leaders are, I mean, if you're recognizing that there are things that can be changed within an organization, and nobody's changing them, what do you have to lose? What is the worst thing that can happen? And I think a lot of the times, like, and also, so a lot of the times we only think of what's the worst thing that can happen, but also what's the best case that can happen? And I always say to my clients, they're like, well, what if I fail? I'm like, but what if you succeed? What happens if you succeed? And and then again, what if you fail? Are you going to lose your job? Is anyone going to lose their life? No. And we build this failure up in our head to be so much bigger than it really is. And I think I want all leaders to know that their ideas and opinions deserve to be heard, and they have incredible ideas and opinions. And if they're noticing that something can be changed within their organization, if they're not comfortable, bringing it up in a big leadership meeting, pull your boss aside. Try it out on them first. It's one person, you can build your little script and talk about it, and also really being sure to talk about, what the straight facts are, not your perception of the situation, but what is actually happening here, how it's making you feel, what the unmet need is for not only for you, but within the organization. And then being able to make a request of your manager, and just being able to communicate within that structure is going to be really supportive as well.
Yeah. And I love the like example that sets, right? Because I do feel like from a leadership perspective, it is our opportunity to lead by example. And sometimes that means, I'll be honest with you, I hate the phrase imposter syndrome because I feel like everyone has self-doubt, right? Like, especially
100%.
When you're leveling up, you're going to doubt, like, can I do this? I've never done it before. I don't. My son is having this experience on his bike right now with the training wheels taken off.
Yeah.
He's not sure he can do it. And at some point, you have to just try, right? There's no way to learn how to ride the bike without the training wheels, without riding the bike without the training wheels. And so when because it says I've seen this happen like almost every time, although I don't believe in absolutes. But when we stand up and we can use our voice in the team. Even if it's maybe something that we deem small, like, hey, I've noticed that the water machine is always empty around 2:00. Is it something that the office manager could look at? Right? Might be something, I don't even know why that came to my head, but it's possible. It might be little things, and then that might give your team the confidence they need to share with you their ideas and their perspectives, because
exactly,
it's such a gift to have someone new, to have a new leader, to have a new employee. I used to always love like the first 30 days of a new employee, and I would be like, okay, so I want you to experience all our processes and stuff, and I want you to tell me what you think is stupid. Because we work this process every day. We think it's fine, right?
Yeah.
And it is probably fine, but like, could it be better? We just aren't looking at it that way. And if you're looking at it that way, it could help everybody. And so when we take those opportunities, and I don't know, what do you think about this, Kelsey? Because like confidence is a thing you build, right? So it's like you got to practice doing things to build
exactly.
it. And so like, kind of have to do things scared in order to build my confidence. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I completely agree. And so, yeah, to that point, a framework that you've probably walked your clients through, I walk my clients through, is the difference between, okay, well, here's your comfort zone, here's your stretch zone, here's your panic zone. And if something's in the panic zone, how can we get it in the stretch zone? If something's in the comfort zone, how can we get it in the stretch zone? And being able to reflect on that, like, is this is talking to your boss about this really in the panic zone? What makes it in the panic zone? How can you shift that for yourself? And I think just a reminder outside of the confidence, if anyone here hasn't heard of groupthink bias is when everybody has the same opinion and everyone is afraid to voice their opinions and ideas, and then a company or a meeting continues to run inefficiently and not optimally, and then it affects so many parts of the organization. So in not speaking up, that is, in a way, I mean, I don't like to guilt and shame anyone. That is not the point of this, but really it's contributing to groupthink bias by not sharing your opinions and ideas. And that's what makes them so much more valuable.
And I think I like that perspective too, Kelsey, from like one of the phrases I always use is try it on. It's one of the reasons why this conversation, this series exists, because like there are new ideas and some of them you will agree with and some of them you won't. And until we practice, what do we agree with and what do we not? Like if we always just practice going along, then we don't actually even know what we think. So then if I'm going to try and put myself in the shoes of extrapolating, like, what do I look like as a leader? I don't even know, because I don't know what I would do. And when we practice these things, and whether or not, I'm not saying jump on the table today and like say all the things you've been thinking for
sure,
like 5 years, but like just start to look at it with that critical mind. Like, is this person, do I agree with what my boss is saying?
Yeah.
Maybe I do. Like, and if you do,
right.
It's okay to go along, right? Like, or even just to like very confidently say, yes, I agree with this because blah, your reason, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't, even if you don't say anything, it's important to know that you don't. And it allows you that space to like take away and say, okay, so that's what they're doing. Maybe there's lots of organizations that have like leadership bullies, right? And so someone might charge ahead and go do a thing they want to do anyway, and you might not be able to stop them. And it is what it is. But when you know, I wouldn't do that, but you take it one level further so that you know why you wouldn't do that. Because this was a place that I got really stuck. I got stuck in this place of, I knew I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what I would do. So I kind of just like went along and then felt yucky about it because I knew I wouldn't do it. Kelsey, do you have any tips in that scenario that can help us get and like reconnect to our whys?
Yeah, great question. I think So, something some of my clients have done and we've done together is, if that specific scenario and responding to that and sharing your ideas feels like it's really big, then what we would essentially do on a weekly basis is come up with, let's call it 2 to 3 things, small things that scare you, and then holding yourself accountable to do those things. And then slowly and slowly building it up and building up that confidence to be like, oh, I did this scary thing today. I did this scary thing this week. And eventually, I mean, that's what's happened to so many of my clients who were afraid to voice their opinions in meetings. By the end, they're like, okay, well, I've done all these scary things and I felt good and I felt confident, and it's given me the confidence to do scarier things. Now I'm at this big scary thing. It doesn't seem so scary. So that's definitely a big one. And then I think also just coming back to, again, I know we were talking about earlier, and what that leadership looks like for you, who you're being, your version of success. I mean, coming back to that, and is how you're behaving and how you're being in this moment in alignment with that. And if it isn't, okay, so what is that going to look like for me to shift out of that? And even understanding and coming back to what your core values are, and asking yourself, is what my manager is doing in alignment with what I value, and how can I bring that back to what feels good for me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this was something I had this experience when I was in corporate, and this was before I was a leader. I was an account manager, and the company was going for why is the casino? I don't know why this is leaving my head. And I believe if people want to gamble, they can.
Yeah.
I don't believe in advertising it. And so when I found that out, I said, because this was like a thing that like rubbed it up against my values so hard that it actually felt easy for me to say like, hey, I appreciate that the company is going for this. If that's the direction the company wants to go, I'm not going to say anything. I just can't account manage that. So like we have other account managers. So just as you're planning this, plan that the other account manager will be responsible for this, because I can't do that. And it was interesting because now I know that was like a values-based friction.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't have the language for that. I felt it so strongly that I couldn't do that.
You had that full body reaction. Another key. Full body reactions.
And I think these are the types of things I love bringing up in these conversations, because I think people have had them, right? I think most of us has had those moments where you're just like, ugh, like I can't. Or maybe it's, I think my experience of it was that I can't. Really now my words are like, I won't do that.
I mean, even your body language right there, when you said I can't, you put your hand up. Like,
even when I think about it still, I still have that physical reaction. And there's like really interesting things to learn about from our body.
Yes.
And how we're responding to these things. So
yes.
There's our own reactions, but also let's look at this now from like our like senior leader perspective. Like, how do is there something we can like kind of turn on in our brains that says like, maybe I should look for the like physical reactions of people towards things?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think while we're observing what our physical reactions are, I mean, I know when I am frustrated in a work setting, like my shoulders come up, my chest tightens, and I do the hand thing too. I mean, it would like, just stop. And so once you have an understanding of what your full body reactions are, I mean, even talking to people, colleagues or people in your circle, and helping to understand like what other potential physical reactions are, and then being able to observe your manager's body language in terms of how they're responding, because even the most well-trained managers and senior executives give off a little something with their body. But we cannot help it. Our mind is calm, but our bodies, like there's something happening there. So really being able to, and maybe it's slight. I mean, I know I've seen really well-trained executives just do a little fingers are up when and they're like, no, I don't want to do that.
Or they like clasp their hands
Yeah,
because
clasp
they're
their hands.
actively trying not to do something else.
Exactly. Or you'll maybe notice a tiny like clench of the jaw, and it's really, really, really subtle. Or another thing is if they look down or look to the side. I mean, when you're having a conversation and you're making eye contact with someone, and if you need to think, usually the cue is to look up, and leaders know that. Leaders know, like, if I'm thinking about what I want to say, I look up. If I'm looking down or I'm looking to the side, that means that I'm trying to avoid this conversation or something like that. So it's paying attention to little, and there's so many other little things to pay attention to, but I think starting there.
Yeah. Well, and this is so interesting. I just looked up because I was thinking. Now I can't remember where I was going with that. But yes, I wanted to talk about this because a lot of us are leading in this more digital world where a lot of our interactions are virtual. So on Zoom calls and things like that. One of the things that I know I've experienced is that, like, you can still feel the energy. You can still watch for these things, although you might not be able to see as much as someone's body. But these are still things that we can do in the digital environment. So how do we, when we look at empowering new leaders in a virtual world, what are some additional things we need to consider when it comes to our digital interactions?
So,
or is it just the same things and like a reminder that, hey, all of these things are still relevant. We can still do all of them, even though we might think, I mean, there's all the back to work because we need to be in person, because we need to do these things. I think things are equally transferred in the digital environment. So I would love to hear, Kelsey, from like some of the people that you've coached or some of the workshops that you've done, like what has come up for people in the realm of the digital leadership?
Yeah, and I think generally all of everything that we've discussed is still applicable. Of course, other than body language, I mean, you're really only able to observe their face. But I know a lot of, I mean, yeah, I've got a lot of clients who they've got teams all over the world, and finding it hard to do team building events that include everybody. And I think that's just the nature of having a global organization and multiple offices. There's only so much that you can do, but what you can do is connect with anybody who's with you locally, like find ways to connect with them in person and find ways to make that happen. Or even, I think the biggest thing I noticed in a virtual world is that there were a lot more check-ins, but again, that adds more meetings to your calendar. So is there a way for you to still manage your meetings and manage your time more efficiently so you're able to create that space for your new leaders? And if not, what else can you support them with? How else can you support them? Is there mentorship that you can invest into or them into? So yeah, I think all of those things are important considerations.
Yeah. Okay. So you touched on something I think is really important with that last comment there, Kelsey, which is the curiosity. How can I balance these things?
Yeah.
This has changed. I've got a new employee who interacts with this. So what is the importance of curiosity as a new leader, and how can senior leaders encourage new leaders to practice their curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, most of the clients I work with, a large percentage of them, we talk about character traits that they would like to embody as they move forward as a leader, and curiosity is always within the top 3. And the reason for that is that, I mean, I think managers can encourage it by encouraging, again, going back to that whole encouraging making mistakes, encouraging asking questions, and letting them know that they are safe to ask questions. Because I think people lose their curiosity when they don't feel safe in an environment to ask those questions because they're afraid that it's going to be a stupid question, or they're afraid to make mistakes. So I think, just again, coming back to that, creating that psychological safety, creating that environment where we're acknowledging that we're human beings and that we're going to have questions and we're going to make mistakes, I think is a big way that leaders can support new leaders.
Yeah. I love that. I'm a big proponent of curiosity, even though
Me
sometimes when
too.
my 5-year-old wants to do it, it ends up being frustrating. But I think this is why I think there's so many similarities in our like work lives and our personal lives is that, oh, there's some things where I'm like super excited about him being curious and I like let him go to town. And then there's certain things, or most often times, when I just like then like start to get frustrated and like, why are you asking questions? Why can't you just eat your peas?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because there's also space for us to learn in those opportunities. Like, okay, there's times where I'm like super gung-ho on curiosity, and there's times when I'm not. Okay, what are those times? Where do I feel like now? I remember having this experience actually in business school where we had a time frame. We had to come up with an idea of this event and we had to pitch it to the professors. And we had a guy in our group who kept coming up with new ideas and coming up with new ideas and coming up with new ideas. And I was like, at some point we have to choose an idea and go with it because we have a deadline. So it's interesting to like look at yourself in that way, maybe. And how can you then, or how can you as a manager for new leaders, and how can you as the new leader yourself create the space when you can for that curiosity? And also from a leadership perspective, we got to make decisions and we have to take action and we have to go forward. So we can't ideate forever. But creating that, I mean, this is a thing that works for my 5-year-olds. It works for lots of people, is like create those boundaries, right? But yes, we are going to have space for this. And once the space has been provided, then we still have to go forward and do things. And get curious with yourself about how you might create that.
For sure.
Yeah. Awesome. This was such a great conversation today, Kelsey. If people are looking for more information about empowering new leaders, and specifically females who are looking to empower their own leadership, where can people go to find you?
Yes, give me a follow on LinkedIn. I know we're on LinkedIn right now. If my profile doesn't come up, I'm Kelsey Boyer, Boyer, she/her. My website is wla.coach, and those are the top 2 places I spend the most time, so you can find me there.
Awesome. And do you happen to have any upcoming workshops that people might want to check out? Kelsey's getting married right away, so potentially not.
Yes, I'm getting married on the 29th and going on my honeymoon. So I will be running a masterclass in November. I still need to determine a date, but I do have, it's too far for me to grab it, but you can see in the background here, Things I Wish I Knew. The book I've been featured in as a co-author came out on August 30th, and very exciting.
Congratulations.
And thank you so much. So if you want to check out my chapter on Things I Wish I Knew about climbing the corporate ladder as a female leader, you'll definitely get a lot of insight from that.
Oh, that sounds like something many women who have climbed the corporate ladder would be curious to read.
Yes.
I wonder if we learned the same things or we learned different things. Everybody learns different things. So I love that. Definitely check that out, everyone. Connect with Kelsey. There's like so much good leadership knowledge that she shares very, very widely with her audience, which I really appreciate about you, Kelsey.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone else, for being in the chat today. We had Andrew and Sheik and Farzana. Farzana is saying congratulations to you and Kelsey.
Thank you, Farzana.
And as a reminder, empowering new leaders, empowering people in general, leadership in general, these are not just 50-minute conversations where we learn all the things that we needed to know and then can just like go and do a whole bunch of things differently. And so what I encourage everyone to do, if this is a conversation that is important to you and you're looking to create more intention for yourself in the world, in this arena, get connected to Kelsey, connect with me, connect with the other peeps who are in the chat. These are people who are in the conversation about empowering new leaders. And whether you are looking to empower new leaders or you are looking to be empowered as a new leader, it can absolutely not hurt you to be in conversation about empowering new leaders with this group of people.
Yes.
So thank you all for sharing with us today. Thank you, Kelsey, for bringing all of your marvelous expertise. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.